My name is Neil Padukone. I am Director of Green Economic Transformation at an organization called the New York Climate Exchange. And I want to talk a little bit about this project we just launched called Project Closed Circuit that's putting cities at the center of battery circularity. So just a quick intro to the New York Climate Exchange. We are a very new organization. We formally launched about a year ago. The city of New York put out a tender to develop a center for climate solutions on Governor's Island, but it lies right at the mouth of New York Harbor, right between Manhattan. You can see the skyline right from there, and Brooklyn on the other edge, and it is going to be our home of a physical campus that focuses on research, convening, and education. That takes advantage of its riparian location right there, looking at not only what happens where kind of the earth meets the water, and this very living metaphor of climate change, where you can see where Hurricane Sandy breached the island here, but also you can see the Red Hook container terminal. You can see all these spaces across the city that also shows the promise of how we can move forward from the climate challenges we face. These are a couple of things about what we're going to be working on: built environment, community resilience and health, financial solutions, energy and carbon management, and oceans, and a handful of the tools that we have to do it. But really at the center of it is that we have a very powerful a very powerful and capable network of partners, 12 academic institutions, many of which are in the 5 boroughs of New York City, but many of which geographically stretch as far north as Rochester Institute of Technology, as far west as University of Washington, as far east as Oxford University. And very importantly to today's conversation, 2 of our partners are Duke, our host today, and Georgia Tech. And in addition to that academic heft, we have 3 corporate partners: BCG, IBM, and Moody's, and about 33 different community partners. And these are folks that extend as far as labor unions, local chambers of commerce, arts and cultural institutions, science and research institutes, environmental justice, and economic and community development groups. And the idea is really to source solutions and bridge solutions from across and beyond this network of collaborators, try them out in New York and our forthcoming campus at Governor's Island as a sort of living laboratory, and based on their success, share them back around with our partners and back around to the world. So one of those is, of course, this question of electrification. Just to step back a little bit, many of this will be trodden territory for you. Much of this will be trodden territory for many of you. But, batteries really are at the heart of decarbonization, from fleet electrification to storing solar and wind energy. And as a result, battery demand has really surged over the last few decades, about 33% every single year. 95% of that growth coming from the growth of EVs. And just, we saw a handful of stats, including from Stephanie, about that growth. But in 2013, there were just about 100,000 EVs on the roads worldwide. Just 10 years later, there are about 40 million. And, we saw some charts that showed just the growth in the last few years. And despite what might happen, on some levels, I think the momentum is there. And so I think that's also why we're here. But of course, there are challenges of EV batteries specifically. All batteries require rare earth materials. About 85% of the world's use of lithium, 70% of its cobalt, 10% of its nickel, all go into battery production. And to keep up with all this demand that we hope, frankly, will happen, hundreds of new mines are going to be required to keep up with demand. The challenge on the environmental on the supply side there are environmental concerns with how that mining happens. There are human rights concerns with how that mining happens. And there are supply chain concerns with whether we are dependent on geographies and locations for the sourcing of that material and the processing of that material. Still, despite all that, EVs really are preferable to internal combustion on all of those fronts. And so it is vital that we continue the charge to electrify transportation and much of the rest of the economy. But challenges remain, right? We talked about many of those today: charging infrastructure, just as we did in the last panel, range anxiety, whether we can go as far as we need to, grid capacity, charging time, vehicle availability, whether manufacturers and producers can produce the types of vehicles that consumers need, and even operational utility. Working with fleets in New York, you think about, can electricity provide these heavier trucks with the torque, with the power they need to plow snow, right? Or to lift heavy pallets of, in this case, of Manhattan beer distributors of drinks. But really a big challenge that a lot of fleets are seeing is this challenge of really high upfront costs. That, there's always gonna be these high capital costs with any big technological transformation. But from the perspective of fleets that are looking to electrify, one of the big challenges here is that batteries, of course, degrade to about 70 or 80% of their capacity after about 7 to 12 years, after which they can't be used for their operation in the way that you'd planned. If you need your vehicle to go 100 miles every day, and your charge only allows you to go 50 or 60, you won't be able to use it for that function. And so when fleets are thinking about it, they're saying, it's a great idea, but after 8 years, I'm just going to have this sunk cost of this, 60% of this vehicle, of the vehicle's cost went into this battery, and now it's just a useless asset to me. But then what are we going to do with all those batteries? Right now, landfill disposal, of course, it risks leaching toxic materials if you just toss it. But the alternative right now, recycling, if we just have at current trends, worldwide capacity to safely recycle battery cells will just be about 10% of the batteries in the market that are coming off the market in 2033. Many others, of course, will be informally recycled in the global south, and of course that comes with human rights and environmental concerns of their own. And so really the question here is, without sustainable systems, electric vehicles as a climate solutions could become its own environmental crisis. To say nothing of the fact that premature disposal actually means wasted value for fleets, for the actual operators there. CalSTART, a collaborating partner of ours, has a relatively generous analysis of the residual value of battery electric vehicles that are almost 25% of the vehicle. We are looking to get a little more granular analysis to see what that could mean and try and factor that into upfront costs so that a fleet can start to think of that residual value and the battery itself as an asset, even when it reaches its degraded state of charge. And so that's why, rather than just kind of this make, take, and then break cycle of linearity, the goal of this project is really to move toward a circular market for electric vehicle batteries. And that means really three things. The first is extending their primary use. Tom spoke a little bit about this in the last session about using data and intelligent battery management to really optimize battery performance so that maybe instead of just 7 years before it degrades, you get 10 years, you get 12 years, you get maybe even 15 years if you can optimize it. But then even once it doesn't fulfill your operational needs as a driver or a fleet manager, you can resell it as a pre-owned vehicle to another user who can use that 50, 70, 75 miles a day. The second piece, though, and this is really a big gap in the current thinking at scale, is creating secondary lives for these batteries in energy and grid storage. Even though the batteries will have degraded to about 70 or 80% of their charge, that's still 70 or 80% charge that's left in there. How can we develop and deploy those batteries for second lives give them a secondary use in building energy, grid storage, and even micromobility? Can we take them off the shelf, put them in, or do we need to diagnose the used cells and modules to determine the state of health and then remanufacture them for that? Either way, it's a tremendous value that should not just be disposed of. And then finally, when those second life batteries do ultimately degrade to a point of non-usability, they should be supported, they should be recycled responsibly. And to that end, we'll need to expand recycling capacity to keep up with that ultimate demand so that we can purify those raw materials and circle them back into new batteries. This is a graphic from a collaborative of ours, Moment Energy, which is one of the only, I think one of the only ones in North America, the only companies in North America that has UL 1974 certification that allows them to safely redeploy second life batteries at this time. There are a couple of others in the world, but in North America, they're the only ones with that certification. But they had this really helpful chart where, we have the end use of this of after about 10 years of use in a vehicle. The battery still retains that 80% of its charge. Rather than dumping it directly into recycling, you have this second life where you take advantage of that 80 to 50 or less percent capacity, rather than just throwing that to recycling. And so, there's a tremendous market here and a tremendous opportunity, and then about 1 out of every 5 EV batteries are projected to be suitable for second life applications. And there's a potential supply of about 200 gigawatts just before 2030, and a market value of about $7 billion. And to boot, battery circularity could also decrease critical mineral mining needs by up to 40%, according to the International Energy Agency, and decrease greenhouse gas emissions by a whole lot as well. So to that end, we have launched Project Closed Circuit, which is a collaboration of all of our partners. There's really 3 components to this. One is awareness building, just expanding the constituency to advance battery circularity. Of course, fleet operators want to retain and recuperate some of the value that they spent up front. Fleet and vehicle leasers will want to do the same. Insurers will want to do the same. Waste management professionals, national security professionals as well, who have concerns about supply chains and their origins have a really big part of this conversation too. And so a big part of Project Closed Circuit will be creating content, creating material, getting the word out about the potential of this market. The second piece is around a solutions exchange. Like I mentioned, we have this partnership model of 48 partners, and that's just the formal ones. And so we're developing communities of practice across and beyond the exchanges network, ensuring that local lessons on battery ecosystem development can be shared. And this is at the research level, this is the city official level, this is the regulatory level and beyond. And then the third piece of this work is actual applied urban solutions. We're aiming to develop New York City's role, both as our home, but also as a leading hub for resource-efficient battery innovation, investment, and safe deployment. And the reason we're focusing on New York City is not just because it's our home base, but also because many folks in this world have said, just by virtue of the density, by virtue of the challenges, the regulatory environment, and all of it, makes New York City one of the more challenging places to deploy second life batteries, to deploy any batteries, frankly. And so if we can crack that nut, in fact, they said so much that Fire Department of New York regulations are even more stringent than any UL or ISO regulations. So if we can crack that nut, we can basically open up an entire circular market nationally and beyond. And in the process, we'll be developing a replicable roadmap for battery circularity in other environments, in other urban environments as well, looking at policy and regulatory frameworks, local battery data and end-of-life assets themselves, and then, of course, deployment. To To that first piece about getting the word out, in case any of you are in New York City for Earth Week, I would welcome you to join us at an event we're hosting called New York State of Charge on the evening of the 24th. A QR code for the event is there. I would love to have all of you. This is going to be kind of an overview of the state of batteries in New York and a kind of kickoff point for the project. We'll also have a couple of other events at DC Climate Week and a really big series of things in New York Climate Week in September. But throughout, and even before then, we'll be at Circularity, we'll be at Verge, and hope to see many of you around there and to collaborate on these issues. So with that, I will thank you all for your time and look forward to collaborating on this. This is a different QR code just to the project page and a way to get in touch. Thank you.